Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on The Divide. I want to start off the show by just making an acknowledgement, being transparent with you about the Manny Ellis case in Tacoma. So in full transparency, we are taping this show early this week. It is Thursday. We're doing that because I'm going to be out on vacation for a few days. And the reason I'm telling you that is we just do not have the up-to-date information at this moment during the taping to be able to cover that case on the show today in a way that will do it justice. However, if you would like up-to-date information and coverage of the Manny Ellis case, be sure to flip over to our regular newscast, which airs 7 to 11 a.m. on Joe TV. All right, with that said, we do have a busy show for you today, and we start down in Olympia, where the mom of an elementary school student hopes other parents can learn from an ordeal she went through related to her child and the COVID pandemic. When Danielle arrived to pick her daughter up at East Olympia Elementary, she says the staff didn't seem to know where 8-year-old Emery was.
They couldn't find her. And it took about 10 minutes of them radioing back and forth, saying her name. They've said her name, kept asking me if I had another child to pick up and couldn't quite get her name. So I was starting to get worried Emery might have been missing or something had happened to her.
She says 10 excruciating minutes went by before the school's principal finally offered information on her daughter's whereabouts, information that would only lead to more questions.
The principal came up to my truck and asked me to pull around to the very back of the school behind the buses. And I waited there for about 10 minutes, honestly, just trying not to have a panic attack because I was very worried about my child. I looked at my phone to make sure I hadn't gotten any phone calls, and I had nothing. And the principal finally came up to my truck and she said, "Well, we had an incident today."
It turns out that Emery had spent the previous 4 hours here in a COVID isolation room inside the school. Danielle had no idea, and no idea her daughter had potentially been exposed to the virus by a fellow student.
I was immediately said, "Well, where is she though?" Because I'm like, "Where's my child? I've waited for over 45 minutes." And she said, "Well, we're going to bring her." And when I said, "Well, where is she? Where was she being kept?" And they said, "Oh, was in the quarantine room." No one could answer to me why I was never called.
The Tumwater School District claims staff did try to contact Danielle after Emery and some of her classmates were taken to the isolation room around lunchtime, a claim Danielle denies, saying she had no missed calls and no messages. What would your actions have been as a mom? Would you have gone to pick her up right away?
I would have immediately gone to go get her. I would have immediately done that. And I wouldn't have been upset at all. I would have been like, "Hey, this is just the risk of putting my child in schools with these guidelines right now."
But she does say she wishes she had known exactly what the guidelines around an isolation room meant. She says she never expected it to look like this.
I feel like in an email somewhere, we should have been aware that there was a chance that our child would be kept in a room that looked like that. And I'm also just shocked, if you really cared about the kids, wouldn't you on their first day of school back be like, "Let's take a field trip to this room that you may have to sit at if you're sick or if a friend is sick. Don't be scared," type of thing. But my daughter never saw that until that day.
And perhaps the part that bothers this mom the most is how the entire ordeal affected her second grader.
A nurse comes out in a hazmat suit with my child. And my child's face is white, her eyes are huge, and immediately says, "Mommy, I'm so sorry." One comment the nurse made to me when Emery had like a face she was going to cry, she said, "Oh, it wasn't so bad. You were given coloring book pages."
She says Emery was excited to return to in-person learning earlier this year, but now, after being put in the isolation room, she wants to stay home. So now that this happened and she doesn't want to go back, how does it make you feel?
My heart's broken. She's an incredibly gifted child. She is just qualified for the highly capable program in the school district and would move on to a different program next year. And now she doesn't want to go back. She's very scared. She, kind of feels like the adults in her life didn't look out for her. And it's just very heartbreaking.
Danielle provided us with an email Emory's teacher sent to parents after the ordeal, seeming to empathize with how traumatic it had been. The teacher wrote, in part, "Today was a very difficult day for our amazing class. There was a lot of questions and a few tears. If you have not already, you might want to chat with your child about their feeling of the day."
The teacher seemed just as confused and upset by everything as I was.
The school told us in a statement that the isolation room meets criteria from the Department of Labor and Industries. As for the hazmat suit Danielle says Emory was brought outside in, the school says the health department requires that the isolation room supervisor wear PPE, including gloves, a gown, a mask, and a face shield. A school spokesperson told us in an email, "Our staff have the health and social emotional wellness of our students and staff at the top of their priority list. As we have navigated the pandemic, plans have been carefully outlined. Because the pandemic is something none of us have been through, each situation is new, and we continue to adjust procedures as we identify things that can be done better." The spokesperson added, "I'd also like to note that the photos of the quarantine room you provided are not current." Staff members added cheerful animal stickers to try to make it a friendlier environment while following the requirements. Yeah, cheerful animal stickers might help a little bit, but I don't know if they help fully address some of the concerns that Danielle had about her daughter and maybe some of the confusion. And look, I have no doubt in interacting with the school district that, the school cares about the kids, is concerned about the situation. And I've been, corresponding with them about some of the finer points of the story. And I do want to just read really quickly. I don't have it to put it up for you, but I just got it from the Tumwater School District. I had asked, what are you going to change, if anything, moving forward? And they did make an acknowledgement. They said, with the number of calls and conversations that the nurse had to make in this case, because there was about a dozen students impacted, we found there was a lapse in time from when students were taken to the quarantine room and when some families were contacted. In the future, the procedures have been modified, and school staff will be making the initial calls to inform families to come pick up their students, and that the nurse will be in contact with further information pertinent to their students. So that's some good news, a little bit of change there. But I think the one thing Danielle really wanted parents to take away from this, because you're like, well, is this a one-off? What do I learn from this? Just know the procedures for your child. Really take time. Schools do send something out. Really take the time to understand what is going to happen to my child if they have a suspected COVID-19 exposure, and ask to see the quarantine room. Ask to see what it looks like. Get a couple pictures and then talk to your kid about, hey, you might have to go here. Don't be freaked out at this bubble room that honestly looks like a murder scene of some kind to me, like a movie scene. So that's just good to know for parents. Just be informed, know what your kids might encounter. All right, coming up after the break. Yet another attempt to shun Seattle police. We're going to talk about that. Also, the homeless situation, as we know in Seattle, has really just gotten out of control. We're going to look at a new effort to deal with it. Stick around. A group called Challenge Seattle, which is made up of CEOs from 21 of our region's largest companies, has put out a study underscoring what most of us realize, that there is an urgent situation when it comes to our homeless crisis in this region. The report, conducted by Boston Consulting Group, found a 42% rise in homelessness year over year in King County. 42%. And if you think it's just a Seattle-King County problem, it's not. It also found a 27% rise statewide. Obviously, that's incredibly concerning. But the report also outlines 6 key recommendations based on what's working in other states and in other cities to bring the chronically homeless population indoors. I'm going to read through these 6 points of the recommendations from this report. So 1, emergency housing. Obviously, that is a big one. You want long-term, low-income housing, but you need to have something right away. And that goes hand in hand with point 2, on-demand services. When someone needs help, that help needs to be available to them right away. Also, number 3, set up a command center. So you're really funneling all these through a central place. 4, operate with real-time data. So you're not looking at, what were the homeless numbers a year ago? They did a point-in-time count. Have real-time data about what's happening on our streets. Also, using caseworkers who have lived experience, who've lived on the streets, who understand the barriers to getting out of that place. And then finally, and this is critical, number 6, report to the public. Be transparent about where the money is spent, what outcomes that money is having. That is absolutely critical just to keep the public up to date. So those are the 6 recommendations. The CEO, in case you didn't know this, the CEO of Challenge Seattle is actually former Washington Governor Christine Gregoire. She and I spoke about the depth of the crisis and how we have truly come to a crossroads.
Having, the experience in government that you do, and also now working in this capacity, in what ways do you believe the government response to the homeless crisis has either not made it better or made it worse?
So, if you look, for example, in King County, we've been increasing the financial resources to tackle the issue by an average of 21% per year. At the same time, we've increased the chronic homeless population by 42% per year. So it's obviously that's not the sole answer, but rather I think the answer lies in some fundamental things. We need things like emergency housing and services on demand. Too often what we do is we'll have somebody, a case manager, go out and visit with someone and then want them to be scheduled in 3 to 4 weeks to get the kind of help that they need. Too late. These are on-demand services. When somebody's having a mental health crisis or a drug addiction crisis or a healthcare crisis, they can't be waiting 3 weeks to get a schedule or 3 months to be scheduled. They need those services now. But they also need emergency housing, and you can't do one without the other. Too often in the past, we've said, let's get permanent supportive housing. Absolutely, we need that for the long haul. But in the meantime, we need emergency housing and we need the services, and they have to be married together. We need case managers, highly qualified. We've got folks who have experienced chronic homelessness, the Lived Experience Coalition. They can be of immense help. They can build a trusting relationship with these folks. We need to focus on the chronically homeless.
When you talk about things like emergency housing, like low-income housing, services on demand, why haven't we gotten enough of those yet? We've been in a quote-unquote state of emergency around homelessness since Ed Murray was mayor. So those seem like no-brainer things that we should have in place. Why don't we have enough?
So we've been looking at the long haul. We've been looking and funding the state, the city, the counties. We've all been looking at permanent supportive housing, and good progress is being made. But unfortunately, it's 3 to 5 years out when we're increasing our chronic population 42% per year. Hence, we look to California, and there we see the state has been investing in what they call a home key program, which provides emergency housing. Unfortunately, or fortunately, COVID has disproportionately hit motels, and many of them have not been able to survive it. They are now up for sale, and a golden opportunity for us to purchase them and provide services inside so that the chronically homeless population actually have a community in that motel, and they're getting the services and they have privacy. Those are essential elements. What has happened in California with an $800 million appropriation is within 6 months, they were able to house 6,000 chronically homeless people. So we've learned some lessons. There are lessons to be learned by successes in California with that, and to a city and a county that have been unbelievably successful. If we learn from them, we can turn this around if we unite together and work on it.
And we are hearing, I sat down with Dow Constantine 2 weeks ago, and we talked about this new effort that the county is making to get 500 chronically homeless people off the streets by the end of the year. And part of that involves purchasing hotels. So do you see some hope or promise in that plan?
I do. I think what the county is doing is exactly what needs to be done. We just need additional financial resources to bolster the work that's already being done. We need those resources from the cities throughout the state that are getting the COVID relief dollars from the federal government. We need the counties to invest like what we're doing in King County. We need the state to help and invest. But at the same time that we purchase the motel, we need to provide the services, because housing alone is not the solution. But we know, for example, looking at Bakersfield, California, they are at functional zero increase in chronic homelessness when we're at 42%. And if you look at San Diego, they are at +2. And again, our statewide average is 27%. So we know there's a model, and we've made 6 recommendations. We think those are key to our success. And quite frankly, if they can do it, I am absolutely convinced we can as well.
Frankly, the city of Seattle has really, I think, created a division between City Hall and the business community. You know, we have some of the most generous corporations in the world, but the city of Seattle at times has sort of treated them like the enemy. How do we fix that?
So, here's how I look at this issue of chronic homelessness. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. It is not a political issue. It's not a business issue or a government issue. It's all of those issues and a whole lot more. So let's put the past behind us. Let's work together. Let's save people's lives. Let's get our economy up and running again. Let's get the services that people need, and let's ensure we achieve equity. The only way you can do that is by working together. Now, having said that, I want you to know where we found the population to be. We did a survey of King County residents and asked the question, what are your top 3 priorities coming out of COVID? What would you like everybody to focus on? And their answer was homelessness, homelessness, homelessness. So the city council, the business community, the mayor, the county exec, all of us are responsible to the people in many ways. That's what they want to achieve. So let's work together to make that happen.
And we have heard, the rallying cry to really deal with this issue in a meaningful way for years, and every year it gets worse. Do you feel like this is a moment where that can change? Is there something that leads you to believe that, maybe this is the moment where we can start to turn things around?
I do. If you were to talk to folks in Spokane or Vancouver and have them describe the problems that they're dealing with when it comes to those living with chronic homelessness, you'd think you were talking to people in Seattle or King County. This is a statewide problem, and I think people are beginning to realize that. The public, I think, is ahead of a lot of us. They've recognized it. They want revisions in mental health. They want revisions in addiction issues. They want revisions in accomplishment of equity. So I do believe your point, absolutely well said. We are at a pivotal moment. We are at a crossroad, as we put it in the report. We're either going to tackle this issue and succeed, or I don't know that we're going to leave a future that anybody wants to see. And will it be remediable in the future? I don't know.
So let's say you get all of this into place. You've got the rapid housing, the on-demand services, all of that is in place, just as you've laid it out, 6 points. What do you do? And this is the answer, or this is the question I can't ever seem to get an answer to, because I don't know what the best answer is. What do you do with the people who time and time again refuse access to services?
Well, we've had some discussions with the Lived Experience Coalition. And I think part of that is, how have we addressed those individuals? Have we met them where they are, mentally and physically? Have we created a trusting relationship? Have we shown them that, yes, there is a way for them to get the help they need, to get housing, and to live a better life, and to have a permanent exit? I don't think we've done that. That's why the focus on chronic homelessness. That's why everybody getting out of their silos and joining on one agenda, those 6 recommendations that can be modified. I'm not suggesting we know it all. They could be modified, but that's how we do this. So I am absolutely convinced we can be successful. And I wouldn't give up on anyone who's experiencing chronic homelessness. I believe every one of them deserves a good shot at a permanent exit.
Yeah, and the reality is we are in this situation which, for better or worse, brought on by the pandemic. There is a lot of federal money coming to our cities and states. We know King County, Seattle, they have allotted a lot of that to dealing with the homeless crisis. And there are these emergency, for instance, shelters and stuff in place and hotels that we can seize upon. So if there was ever a moment in the past 10 years where they might be able to get a hold of this thing, let's all hope that it is right now. So thank you to former Governor Christine Gregoire, now the CEO of Challenge Seattle. Seattle, for joining us. You can hear my full conversation with her coming up tomorrow on the Divide podcast. All right, after the break, my closing commentary, yet another reminder that some activists really aren't advocating for anything. Stick around. June is Pride Month, and while many of the normal activities aren't happening due to COVID, Capitol Hill Pride is a go in Seattle. Here is the flyer for the event. Capitol Hill Pride 2021. There will be a march and rally on June 26th and 27th with festivities at Seattle's Cal Anderson Park. But absent from those festivities will be Seattle police. The organizers of Capitol Hill Pride put out a statement on their website saying, in part, invitation to everyone, LGBTQ and anyone of any orientation, color, background, race, nationality, and nonprofit organizations to march in support of diversity and equality, except police. Yes, everyone is welcome at this event celebrating diversity and equality, except the police. Organizers went on to write, Capitol Hill Pride is dedicated to creating a safe environment and an atmosphere free of fear and avoid any conflict scenarios with the police department, which is why we are asking this year they stay at the perimeters. So first, I feel obligated to point out what happened the last time police were forced to stay at the perimeters of Cal Anderson Park. I'm referring, of course, to the Occupy protest known as CHOP, where people died in part because police were chased out by unruly crowds. A year later, I thought for sure we would have learned our lesson about police-free zones, but apparently not. Now, the safety aspect aside, this shunning of police absolutely confounds me. SPD has been part of Pride celebrations in the city for years, often marching in larger Pride parade, which is not tied to the Capitol Hill event, although officers do typically attend both. After all, there are many LGBTQ members of SPD, people who want and deserve to be able to celebrate Pride Month as the person they are, who ought to be able to be proud of their identity while also being proud of their service to the city. You know, I got an email from an SPD sergeant and his husband who are upset, understandably, by the decision to ban officers from the Capitol Hill event, and I want to read part of that email to you. They wrote in part, "We know all too well what it means to feel rejected, hated, or closeted. What we are seeing with this ban of police officers is truly all of the above. Even if they were to say non-uniformed officers can come, they are still asking or pressuring someone to hide their identity." They went on to write, "There are many LGBTQ plus officers on the force, and they were just told by their own community, your kind is not welcome here." You know, the idea that some in the LGBTQ community would shun LGBTQ officers reminds me of another story. When this time last year, as unrest consumed the city, I heard from Black officers who were targeted for hate by demonstrators.
They picked out all the Black officers, all of the officers of color, and it was a how dare you do this job.
And like Monique said, the people's sentiment is how dare you pick this profession? Why are you over there? You're on the wrong side. You're not with us.
I couldn't understand, I couldn't grasp why those protesters who believe policing is a racist institution would try to alienate officers of color.
We have to get involved. We have to take our spots in these type of jobs so we can have our voice, so we can help out, so we can see both sides and every side of everything going on. But if we want to stand on the outside and make all the excuses, how are we going to be part of the solution?
So here we are in this time when police departments are under constant pressure to improve, to better reflect the communities they serve, both, by the way, worthy demands. Yet at every turn, some so-called activists are alienating the very officers they should embrace. So as other community members do the hard work to actually build a better system, beware of the people who just want to tear it down. Because if they don't want LGBTQ officers and they don't want Black officers, I'm left to assume that the only thing they really want is attention. All right. Thank you so much for joining us on The Divide. And as I said at the beginning, we are taping this show early this week because I am going on vacation. That is why we are not covering the Manny Ellis case because we simply did not have the latest on that. However, if you would like to get the latest on it, you can watch our newscast, which is on Joe TV, 7 to 11 a.m. All right. Thank you so much for joining us on The Divide. We have a special episode next week as we take a look back at some of the unrest that unfolded in the city this time next year. I hope you join us.